Benz.
Call to order the City Council work session for City of East Grand Forks for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 is now 5 o'clock. Would City Clerk please call roll?
Mayor Steve Gambit.
Here.
Council President Mark Olson.
Here.
Council Vice President Sean Russell.
Here.
Council Members Clarence Fetter.
Here.
Gail Helms.
Here.
Tim Riopel.
Here.
Tim Johnson.
Here.
Mark Demers.
Present.
Does determine quorum. Number one, MNDOT Demers Avenue traffic light replacement and ADA work. Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Council. So again, we originally discussed this earlier this year, but MNDOT again is looking at doing a traffic light replacement project on Demers Avenue at 2nd Street and 4th Street in 2024. Right now, they are estimating the project at about $700,000. The city does have basically 2 legs at each of those intersections. So with that, the city would be responsible for about, well, for 50% of the project cost. So, you know, we're looking at about $350,000, which would be the city share. The last time we kind of brought this forward, you had kind of asked about, you know, what we had for kind of available funds, whether it's in our municipal construction account or our kind of our state aid maintenance account. So I kind of put together a summary based on kind of what we know today for just some upcoming projects in the next 5 to 6 years, you know, where we would utilize either, you know, maintenance funds or the construction allocation funds. And then kind of just so you understand, like the maintenance funds, those are basically just sent to Carla. We can kind of utilize those wherever we want on our street system. The construction allocation dollars that we get, you know, those are basically in a fund with MNDOT, and I have to request those dollars. So again, you know, kind of what we looked at is, you know, what again we foresaw for potential projects the next 5 to 6 years. And again, some of these funds can be moved around if need be, whether between maintenance and allocation, but you know, just based on you know, my discussions with staff and you know what we thought would maybe be the best funds to utilize. I mean, you can kind of see right now down on the allocation funds, you know, we're probably a little short, but then if you looked at the municipal maintenance funds, you know, we got a good balance in there. So again, this is going to kind of be a living document that we kind of probably modify, tweak every year, just, you know, based on what we have available. I did, just for this exercise too, I did reduce our allocation of maintenance funds for fiscal years 2021 and 2022. I reduced them by about 20% because of the COVID stuff that's going on. They are estimating a reduction in, you know, probably what we'll get in an annual allocation. So, so basically what, you know, we're looking at is, you know, a resolution from the city in support of the project, and, you know, noting that the city would be responsible for 50% of the cost. The other thing just kind of wanted to discuss with you is, right now, the MPO is doing a downtown transportation study in Grand Forks and in East Grand Forks. And the study is still ongoing, but through that study, you know, they've kind of identified the need for interconnected traffic signals between Grand Forks and East Grand Forks just to help with flow of traffic. Or there's also kind of they call it an adaptive signal control system, which allows signal timing changes based on, you know, kind of real-time traffic demands. Probably a little more high-tech system, but so I guess, you know, my thought was, and Earl Hogan had talked to me this morning too, is, you know, maybe even in this resolution, you know, maybe we just put in some language in there about, you know, the city supporting or, you know, requiring, you know, I think at a minimum that we'd want to have some type of interconnection between Grand Forks, East Grand Forks for better flow of traffic. And, you know, whether we got to go all the way to that adaptive signal control system, I don't know about that at this point, but I think maybe just some type of formal, something in the resolution, and I could work with Megan on that, just getting something in there. I think at a minimum, we'd want, you know, the signal systems on both sides of the river to kind of communicate, just for better flow of traffic. So I guess with that, I guess I can kind of open it up for any questions that you may have too.
Mr. Emery, this is Mark. Say, you know, you're indicating those, you know, working with Grand Forks on that. With this, what you have in front of us, a 350 match for our city, with those other types of signals, do you anticipate that those are going to be more than? Or is it just the software, or is it software built in already, or?
Well, I probably have to get a little more information from MNDOT, because they did in a letter that they had sent to Earl Hogan. They basically said, basically what they say is the type of video cameras planned to be installed on the signal system have elevated capabilities which may not require adaptive signal control measures. And then they said MNDOT will also consider interconnecting the signals with fiber if available and determined necessary. I think on that interconnection, I think they could use like radio feed. The way I understand it, if you can get a fiber connection, it's a better, more reliable system. So again, right at this moment, I'm not 100% sure on either of those systems, but, you know, again, I just thought, if nothing else, you know, maybe we say we'll support up to 350,000 for now, but yet I think in the resolution, we, you know, show your support for at least some type of interconnection between the two cities.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to say that, I agree with you that we say 350, but if we want to make sure the traffic flow is good between the two cities, which I'm sure everybody does,
Yeah.
we would like to maybe know what the cost is, and hopefully you can get that to us or some idea, answers by next week.
I can try to reach out to this John Mason with MNDOT and try to get some clarification on that. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Riepel.
Bring it.
Does Grand Forks already have it on their new system over there? Do you know?
The way I understand it, their traffic lights are interconnected over there, Mr. Riepel.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Johnson?
I'd be all for the synchronization of it if for ambulance and fire or whatnot, police. I don't know if we need to get really involved.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what he said.
I was saying that, can you hear me now, Steve?
Can you hear him, Steve, at all?
I can't. Can you repeat it, Mark?
Maybe try a different microphone.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm all for synchronization as far as like ambulance, fire, police, you know, on the lights or whatever, but, you know, if it gets to be too involved with the state of North Dakota or Grand Forks or whatnot, I believe emergency would be a priority, but the other would be secondary.
Yeah, let me, like I said, I'll do some checking with this planning guy from MNDOT, and just get a little more information for you guys. And again, I just got the letter here earlier today from Earl Hogan, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to do a lot of research, but I can have that information for you for next week.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Emery? See none, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Move on to number 2, request for filling positions in the Public Works. Mr. Stordahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have our lead equipment operator will be retiring. His last day will be September 20th. And we would like to get what's most likely going to happen if we're allowed to fill the positions will be, so we have to advertise internally first. And we have a few very good candidates there who would who would most likely be operators. So the operator would move into a lead equipment operator position, which would leave a vacancy as an operator in the operator position, which would most likely be, again, it would have to be advertised internally and most likely filled by a truck driver moving up or being promoted. And then we'd be left with a vacancy as a truck driver, which then we'd advertise internally, but externally, most likely hire externally for that position. So we just like to get the process started and try to have all this in place because, you know, come October, we would like to have something in place so we have people and we're ready to train especially the new truck driver before winter comes here. So that's my request, to get the hiring process started to fill the possibly 3 different vacancies.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Stordahl? The mayor.
Just one question, procedurally, how do we handle that with civil service? Are they able to convene and consider multiple positions all at once, or do they have to get together all separate times for those 3?
I guess I haven't dealt with it in this fashion before. I don't know if Jeff Bushy's on. He just dealt with this in the fire hall.
Yep.
I guess I'm not sure if they can take all 3 of them or if we're going to have to go step by step through. But, you know, it's early on, even if we do have to go one by one. I would imagine we'd have plenty of time to get it done by September, you know, the end of September. So.
Jeff, how did it go for you? I know you did kind of a leapfrog thing like that.
Yes, good evening, Council, Mayor. I worked with Terry Knutson on that, and Terry was arranging that through the civil service. So I'm not sure how they were planning on handling that. I was assuming that they were going to do 2 positions all at the same time. We were looking for 2 positions at the same time for promoting internally. As it turned out, they came to an agreement looking at our internal process, and they certified them and moved them on to the fire department without the civil service interview.
Okay. If there would be a way, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is David. I was gonna say that's typically what has happened with those in the past, because you're coming from such a small pool. There's only a couple candidates that are qualified for moving up in the internal promotions. Typically, the civil service just moves them along rather than interviewing them. They just put them all forward for the final interviews with the department head.
Good. I'm looking out for our volunteers. I know it can take one full morning for a position from like 8 until noon. And so any bit of combining that we can do as a courtesy to our board members, I think that'd be a good thing. Thank you.
And typically what happens then is so they'll do that for the promotions, then the entry-level position that gets advertised externally, and then they go through the civil service process.
Thank you.
Anybody else have
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry. I have spoke with Terry Knutson a little bit, and she, as of yesterday, she had already let 2 of the civil service members know kind of what might be coming down the pipeline, just to make them aware. And so I guess she's on board already, kind of knows what might happen. So
Good. That's a good board. Those are good people. They'll do a good job.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, Jason, those people were already, you know, like your internal, moving up and moving forward with public works. They've already been before a board.
I couldn't hear that, Mark.
The civil service does get involved. Due to the rules, they do get involved when it comes to internal promotions.
Okay. Never mind. We got it figured out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything for Mr. Stordahl? See none, sir. Thank you so much.
you.
Move on, number 3, update on Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails grant application. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the packet today, I put some updated engineer's estimate of cost for work on the Lefebvre Park area, the master plan that we discussed last year, that Mr. Emery helped me with, put together. The grant application that we've applied for the last few years is due again at the end of July. And at a work session in late May, we discussed the idea at least of looking at the boat ramp itself as one of the areas to focus on. I would truly agree with that from the discussion we had in May, and that if we look at, I think, priorities down in that area, the biggest priority we need to find an answer for improvement on is that boat ramp. Even this summer, with everything else that's happening, we're still seeing a lot of use there. With the league launching out of that site a lot, and on the weekends, it seems like there's at least always 3, 4, or 5 vehicles there with boats. So it does get good use, and it seems like each flood we have, it falls apart a little bit more. So I hope there can be some urgency to that. So what I put in front of you is a few different engineers' estimates, just to again focus mostly around the area of the boat ramp. I started it with wanting to provide let's say the cheapest option or the most affordable option of just putting in a new ramp in the space or just to the south of where the current ramp is. And the idea being that could be the first step still of a phased idea to match kind of what we put together as a master plan last spring and summer. The current ramp could stay there as is while construction was being done on a new one. So that price is the first engineer's estimate that's included. Then beyond that, I asked Mr. Emery to put together a couple of engineers' estimates if we were going to remove the current ramp and put in the new 2-ramp system and parking space as is kind of laid out in that master plan. I would say the only thing that I asked him to change from what we've seen, and to some of your comments in the last year or two, as we've seen the floodwaters come up and down in that area, I've had more of an opportunity to look more closely as that happens and kind of what the ice does. The first plan, we had the entire parking lot listed as bituminous. And you'll see in the updates now, there's one that is just simply a gravel parking lot to expand the gravel parking lot further. And then there's a second price, the most expensive price would be to still put in a concrete curb and gutter to help with that stormwater retention, but still have a gravel parking lot inside of it. Very similar to what we see at the launch that we have on the Red Lake River. That's got concrete curb and gutter with a gravel space to park in. And that seems to handle the floodwaters very well as the water goes up and down. And then finally, the fourth price I gave you was an idea to do a mill and overlay on the current street that goes through that park, First Street Northwest, which runs between the 2 softball fields and along the football field. And actually, in the last few weeks here, as we've been looking a little bit more closely at this, Mr. Stordahl started a conversation with myself about potentially to help limit some costs even further. Is that street, do we need that to be a through street that starts just as you cross the Louis Murray Bridge and runs all the way down to the railroad trestle? And potentially, rather than mill and overlay that entire street, could we remove a portion of it and have it become a dead-end street at the end of the football field and kind of have it be a turnaround? And that is one that we looked at that could save some funding and would also, I think, really help us with the speed of traffic on that street. If it's not a through street anymore, we may not see it function as much as a 40-mile-an-hour street that people drive on, and much more so as just a park access road to get into those spaces. So that's one idea I thought was a nice idea. Talked with Mr. Emery about it, and that's the price that's included in this estimate, is actually to do that work. If we wanted to mill and overlay the entire through street as it is now, it would add another probably $35,000 to that estimate. So ultimately, there's 4 prices in front of you. The grant application, what I put in front for a 25% match, would be just replacing a new boat ramp to be similar to the style we have, and then the mill and overlay of that street as discussed. And then there's a portion as well for connecting people to the outdoors. That's a pillar that the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission has asked all of the applicants to put an emphasis towards this year. in really trying to bring, if they're going to provide funding to these areas, also tie in a component of how are we going to make sure we continue to introduce new people to using these facilities and make sure it's a viable resource for the community that gets used. So that's an important piece for them. And in total, the project cost is about $450,000, of which the local match for those three components would be $117,000. And again, just to point out, as the packet said, we'd be looking at most likely calendar year budgeting for this for the city of 2022 and 2023, just the way the grant contract period would cycle. So I think at this point, open for if there's any conversation on the plan or comments or questions for us. And if we think we want to move forward with the project, I'd hope to bring that to the council meeting for approval next week.
Does anybody have any questions for Reid at this time? Mayor?
I really think that's a sensible package that you've brought. I think it reflects our highest needs. It's also very much flood-proof, the things that we're proposing down there. And so there's no possibility of just throwing money down there that'll get washed away in the next flood. It is an area that's heavily used, and that usage will increase. I think when the quality of the boat launch and some of the other amenities down there, get the kayak launch, which we've talked about, that whole area is going to come to life. Again, we want to do it cautiously, sensibly, making sure that the investment we make will withstand any flood and ice flow that comes through there. I think this is a good first step.
Anybody else have anything for Reid at this time? Dale?
Yeah, do you have, or could you give me a breakdown on that price on those boat ramps? That just seems like a lot of money.
Yeah, we can provide that, Mr. Helms.
If you could, I'd appreciate it. I'd just like a breakdown how you come up with that amount.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Riepel?
Just refresh my memory on this. Is this a one-time grant option, or can we apply again?
Thank you. Good question. Yeah, we certainly can apply year after year. If you all recall this, we do have some grant funding lined up, hopefully to receive from the 2018 application that we hopefully will receive some funding from either still this calendar year or next calendar year. That grant that was awarded to us is just now in the process with the DNR of being approved by their historical preservation offices and kind of the state bureaucratics that have to go through before we get the funding to start doing anything. But that was for the kayak launches that Mayor Gander referred to. So we certainly can, long answer, yes, we can certainly apply year after year to this as long as funding remains available through legacy dollars to the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Demers?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through a lot of options just what option are you proposing at next week's meeting? Just so I'm clear.
The two projects that I included, one is I would say the minimal boat ramp replacement. So that would just be one boat ramp. That's phase one, the first estimate that's included in your packet. And then include the fourth one that it talks about the mill and overlay of First Street. The other two, I would not move forward at this time, or unless you all felt that you'd rather see those dollars committed towards that at this point.
Okay.
Just for there for reference for you.
When you're talking about phase one and you look back at the plan sheet that WITSET's prepared, you're looking at adding an additional boat ramp. Is it going to be what's depicted in the drawing, or at some point people were talking about moving one further south and splitting them, or what's your plan?
Yeah, what I asked Mr. Emery to prepare was basically as it's depicted in the drawing. If you look at the drawing that we have in that master plan, that shows two ramps. I would look at this for the sake of this phased application. The first ramp in that picture would be the current one, and we'd basically put a new one in just to the south of it. And the idea would be that going forward, if we continue to apply for funding or find funding, that eventually we could replace both ramps to still get to the point of what the master plan depicts.
So what could you, I mean, I guess I could probably put it together too, but if you wanted to do one ramp and then upgrade the lot, what kind of dollars are we talking about that? I mean, fully upgrade the lot.
I didn't ask Mr. Emery to look at that, but we certainly could put that together.
Yeah, basically, it would be, you know, we got the phase one there, we got 2 boat ramps with the gravel parking lot, so I think if we basically just pulled about 125,000 off of that estimate, that's pretty much where we'd be at.
I misunderstand, Mr. Demers, were you talking about everything that's here, plus instead of gravel coming in with asphalt?
Well, not asphalt, no, just curb and gutter.
Curb and gutter, okay, so that's.
Gravel, I think that's the better, I mean, the one that we have at the Eagles Point or
Works
whatever
well.
is a great boat ramp. It's just,
Absolutely.
That's why I think he's saying phase one, the page 11, you would remove,
just remove 125,000 from that.
is that what you're saying, Mr. Emery?
Yeah, are you looking to include the curb and gutter, Mark?
Well, that's what I was thinking, I mean, if,
So, yeah, you can see we got, the one that says 2 boat ramps with gravel parking lot and concrete curb and gutter. So I think if we just took that total, let's say roughly 956, and minused out 1 boat ramp, you know, so we took about 125,000 off of that, that's gonna be close.
Did I answer your question, Mr. Demers?
I mean, it's just, so when you're talking minimal work to parking lot, what does that mean? Because you're talking about $170,000 difference of what you're planning between the two.
All we were looking at there is if, you know, when we put in that second boat ramp there, if we just needed some minimal parking lot work there, just to make sure we had a, you know, decent parking lot kind of between the 2 boat ramps. That's what we were just thinking there. Very, very minor work to the parking lot. Where on the other options, you know, we basically pretty much core out that entire area, put in new gravel base, and you know, pretty much totally reconstruct the gravel parking lot.
And you have like double the mob in there, is that just because you figure it'd be 2 different contractors doing it, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess, again, you know, with the increased project cost, I mean, mobilization, the bonding, everything else kind of goes up with that, so. But I can provide Reid with kind of an itemized cost breakdown with just the 1 boat ramp with a gravel parking lot and curb and gutter. So we have an actual number.
Because it talks about a bit access road as well on that double one.
Yep.
And that's going from where to where? That's connecting like the south corner to the main access road, or is that the access road in between like Hill Street and First?
Yes, that's kind of that connection between, Hill Street and First Street. And that's something Reid and I could even probably talk about more too, is if we're not going to have that bituminous connection anymore, maybe even that access road, maybe we just even make that gravel.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, does that have to be, could it be a gravel road, or, and I guess my point is if you're including it in that 4th one, and then you're also including it in the itemized for the mill and overlay, are we double counting that or not?
No, we pulled that 26 feet out of the mill and overlay,
Okay.
the 4th estimate there. We pulled it out of there and left it in on, you know, the third estimate there. So again, I guess for some cost savings, maybe we even just look at that being gravel also. I don't think Reid would have a problem with that.
No, I wouldn't have any problem at all with that. And that was the idea with kind of listing some of the pricing the way we did. We just wanted to give a few options for you to look at, especially in light of having a concern over how much local match we're going to feel comfortable committing to. So that's why I suggested that, you know, the first step, the biggest priority is getting a ramp that's safe to use there. But certainly would love the idea of being able to commit a few more resources to getting it done.
This might be a question from you, from Mr. Stordahl, or whoever can answer it. On that, if we're going to mill and overlay, what's the last time we did something to that street? And I guess ongoing, what would be our routine or our timeline? We'd have to go back and do something again.
The last time, I'm not sure when the last time was. It was prior to me coming on working with the city, so it's got to be at least 11 years. Typically, it's about every 7 to 10 years we've been milling and overlaying streets. So
yeah, you can see on First Street there, when the core project came through, they, you know, disconnected a lot of the old sewer services and stuff, because you can see where they've cut in the road to, you know, disconnect a lot of the old sewers and stuff from the homes. So I honestly don't think anything has been done to that street, you know, after the flood. So I think everything is pre-flood over there.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? See none? So do you have a clear direction, Mr. Huttunen or Mr. Emery?
You know, I think the first step would be if everyone else is okay with what Mr. Demers is referencing, we can get back into some numbers on the boat ramp to provide that for next week's meeting. And then just what I think I would do is bring the resolution and bring a few different project estimate scenarios for you. And if you all think about if there's a certain dollar amount of local match that you're interested in committing to, if anything at all, that would be the next step that would help me. And if you don't have that answer tonight, that's fine. I can just bring a few different scenarios to the agenda next week and see what y'all think.
Would, you know, you mentioned something about gravel instead of doing the mill and overlay. Is that what you're talking about? Or is that not the mill and overlay area and still do that? Maybe clarify that when you guys are talking about that. The gravel area.
I think when they were talking gravel, Steve and Mr. Demers, they were talking at the access to the boat ramp area, the road right when you come down Hill Street or come under the railroad trestle, there's a pavement area there. That is not included in that mill and overlay estimate that Mr. Emery provided. So that was what it is included in the concrete curb and gutter $950,000 price. That's, I think, what Mr. Emery is referring. If we switch that to gravel, that could save some funding there.
That's correct, Reid.
I just want to make sure, because I know Reid and I have had a discussion earlier today regarding what the qualifications are for the grant, and we have to be careful because we have to be under 40% of a road access of the total funding, what it costs. So I just wanted to make sure. Anybody else have anything? I see none. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Elms, second by Mr. Vetter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Demers.
I just wanted to know what the schedule is for starting budget talks and when we're going to start getting some numbers or some, at least preliminary stuff.
Carla, would you like to address that? I know we actually met earlier today. The CAFR should be ready, would you say, probably about a week should be getting it back?
They're starting the process now. So I guess the other thing is just start the budget the way we are. I know I'm working on getting information to the department head. So I guess whenever you choose, like I suppose the first work session in August or...
Okay.
Yep, I think the sooner the better, just to start the conversation. I had that same thought in the last week.
Okay. And I guess one thing I will say, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities did their in brief earlier today. I'm not sure if you guys saw that or not, but there is some good news in that as far as the revenues have come back up for the state. They're still potentially showing a deficit, but it's definitely trending in the right direction. And I think the estimate is that it's going to keep improving as hopefully we keep opening up more and more restaurants are doing more business, those type of things. So I think it's going to be even better yet. But so the budget deficit that was projected earlier this spring does not look near so dire at the moment. So that is some good news.
And then just,
Also,
go ahead, Carla.
also the estimate I gave you a couple months ago on the increase in our fund balance, it's over $500,000, so.
And then last week, we talked a little bit about the money from the state, well, from the feds through the state, and possible uses of it. I thought maybe we were going to talk about it today, but is there a plan to discuss potential uses of that?
Like I said last week, we are waiting for the league to come up with some guidelines. There is a webinar that I'm going to be involved in tomorrow with Gary Carlson from the league. I don't know how much we're going to talk about that, but I know the league is working on putting some parameters together.
Okay. Thank you.
But I guess one thing I can say is that I know in anticipation of that, I know Carla has been working with the department heads to make sure that we're tracking what we anticipate that we'll need to track for potentially reimbursement and for funding uses for protections, those type of things, meaning like air handling equipment, those kind of things.
Okay.
Mitigation that we can carry on for years.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We had a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Means adjourned. Thank you.
Megan, may I give Reid's papers to you?